Never trust a big butt and a smile. Wise words, right? It was 1990, and the song Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe was everywhere. A massively successful up-tempo party jam a few years after the members of New Edition briefly went their separate ways. BBD were suddenly at the forefront of New Jack Swing with this inescapable, infectious bop. Often hailed as a song that reinvented the New Jack Swing sound. When I think of 1990, it is absolutely the first song that comes to mind. You can play this song right now and folks will stop what they're doing to dance or sing at the top of their lungs. Yes, there are other songs of the past that will still get people excited, but folks just act different when this comes on. It excites them in a way I can't even describe. And in 1990, I was mesmerized watching the video. They were just so cool. The fashion, the style, the attitude. They were transforming the culture, and my friends and I all wanted to dance like them. The boys wanted to look like them. Looking back, I realized nothing on radio at the time sounded like Poison. It was R&B, it was hip hop, it was soul, it was pop, and it felt incredibly refreshing in a way nothing before it had. When we talk about cultural touchstones, shifts in sound, when we talk about lineage in R&B, when we talk about timeless classics, we have to talk about what Poison did in 1990.
Clips of 1990 play in my mind simply to remind me I was there. A glimpse of my mom's handwriting on a VHS label noting the first episodes of In Living Color, certainly to be watched again at leisure, struggle mornings preparing for the 5-minute walk to second grade, and the ever-present vibration of the stereo, larger than life for a kid losing their baby teeth. It felt like a year of transformation and sweet familiarity. Anita Baker still had it. When I first heard Talk to Me one fall morning before school, I felt this quirky sense of energy that lifted me towards a new sense of appreciation I was developing for the jazzy R&B that didn't quite sync with the tides of the New Jack sound. I loved both fervently, however. And looking back, I'm grateful that this decade, in my opinion, was the most prosperous period for the genre. This sound aquarium, a maze that you didn't quite want to get out of. And its current cast of R&B artists that I vibe with that pull their identities from this decade. I am writer and professor Ashley Blackwell.
I'm screenwriter and music lover Robin Shanae.
And this is Rhythm and Schooled.
Breaking down 90s R&B, 1 year at a time. Episode 1. 1990. Let me take you on an escapade.
Some highlights from 1990 start with February 16th, and the album Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd is certified 11 times platinum. It was first released in March 24th, 1973. On March 1st, Janet Jackson kicks off her Rhythm Nation 1990 tour in Miami, Florida. April 14th, A Tribe Called Quest releases their debut album, People's Instinctive Travels and Paths of Rhythm. June 21st, Los Angeles, California declares and celebrates Little Richard Day at City Hall. Sidebar, I just recently did an Instagram story about that time when Little Richard was at the Grammys and he was on stage with David Johansen of the New York Dolls. When he talks about the best new artist is, he goes, me. And he was like, you ain't never give me no Grammy. You never do nothing. I was the architect of rock and roll, and everyone applauded, but everyone should have been giving him his Grammy.
Exactly.
He deserved. And that's not the first time I've seen that clip, but I really, really love it and appreciate. I love that Little Richard appreciated himself and also knew his worth, basically. And that's why I've always loved him. And of course, I love his music as well. On July 2nd, the Italian Catholic Church attempts to stop Madonna from performing in Rome on her Blind Ambition tour because of her use of crucifixes in her show. And on August 5th, the tour gained HBO its highest ratings to date. So, to no surprise, the best-selling album of 1990 was Madonna's Immaculate Collection. A little bit later on, in November 19th, Milli Vanilli manager Frank Farian admitted that the singing duo were not the singers on their albums, and they were ordered by the Grammy Association to return their awards. The year-end #1 song on the Billboard charts was Hold On by Wilson Phillips. That was immortalized by Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle when they sang that song with each other in the car ride in the finale.
And also on Bridesmaids, because they definitely sung that at like 10 times at least.
Yes, so the song clearly is reverberating for generations, which is really cool. So for 1999 music trivia, Driving Miss Daisy wins the Oscar for Best Film. In the fall of 1990, a man named Tim Berners-Lee created the first web server and the foundation for the World Wide Web, which we now all use. The biggest movie of 1990 was John Hughes' Home Alone, and the number one TV show is Cheers. Out of all of this trivia and these highlights from the year, what stands out to you?
I'm still a huge Madonna fan. Day one fan, had the posters on the wall with Prince and Michael and Janet in New Edition. But I was just thinking, like, Madonna was really everywhere. And I remember some of my friends and classmates, most of them probably lying, about seeing the Blonde Ambition tour on HBO. And every time anyone mentions Driving Miss Daisy winning an Oscar, I just laugh. I mean, come on, right? Like, Do the Right Thing is one of the greatest movies ever. And it should have won the Oscar. It is probably considered to this day one of the most impactful and influential films. And I don't hear anyone talking about Driving Miss Daisy other than discussions about magical Negroes.
Or it's been parodied. Like one of my favorite films from the early 90s is Stay Tuned, and it has a very young John Ritter, and he's kind of like stuck in this like television program kind of a thing, and where he's like jumping from channel to channel. And there's one where he's like on the road and he's got this like this suit on, but it looks like he's from like the 1940s or wherever. And then like he sees this old woman trying to like flag down like a car or whatever, but she gets ran over, and the movie is apparently called Driving Over Miss Daisy. Like,
Oh, that's hilarious. I remember that movie too.
and
I,
then I think yeah, and then in Living Color did a very inappropriate
yes, I was
parody.
going to say, it was called Riding Miss Daisy.
I can't.
Yeah. Also, yeah, during that time, I saw Home Alone in the theater. My aunt took me and my cousins, and I remember this because it's still one of my favorite Christmas movies to this day. One of my favorite movie experiences. I mean, seeing Home Alone in the theater was absolutely amazing when you were a kid.
Most of the things I remember, mostly in retrospect, because I was still very young in 1990. So, like for example, I am a Madonna fan, but my heavy Madonna phase comes with the Ray of Light era. Going back and like watching and listening to all the stuff that I didn't listen to before, and like getting the albums and listening to all of them. For example. But the biggest thing that's kind of stood out was in '89 when she did Like a Prayer,
Mm,
because I remember my mom and her peers were like real invested in that and the controversy surrounding Like a Prayer. So Immaculate Collection, I think, was the first album I actually bought with my own little allowance money. And again, I loved all of that. And then again, I was going back and back and back and back. So the whole tour and the HBO stuff, I was not prepared and ready for that. I was too young. Obviously, I remember her stirring the pot in the media because of Like a Prayer, and then kind of hearing about it and like kind of doing my own personal research because I was obsessed with her for a while there. And of course, the singles and videos from Rhythm Nation. I think my favorite when I was a kid was All Right, the video and the song. So yeah, Janet Jackson was a big deal,
yeah.
and I was very much immersed in that myself.
Oh, she was a huge deal, right? Like, oh my gosh. For me, Rhythm Nation is probably my favorite Janet album. I mean, she has a lot. I have a lot of favorites of Janet, but that might be my favorite of all her albums. I still remember playing that cassette over and over again. Scared it would pop. Remember when cassettes would pop and you would have all
Yes.
this tape running everywhere? Yeah, that's how
Mhm.
much I played that Janet album out. It's wild how Janet dropped that album in '89 and it stayed on the charts until 1990 and probably into 1991. I mean, albums used to have real longevity back then.
Yeah, that's why it was hard, like, coming up with this podcast and compiling things, because 'cause I'm just like, "Wait a minute, didn't that come out that came out the previous year, but it was really charting this year, and everyone was recognizing it the year after it came out." So and
Hmm.
I felt the same way about Janet, because I think if you were to ask the average person on the street, they would go 89, 90, 91. They would there's no definitive year that they would probably think unless they were like a serious music historian or super like a Janet super fan, right? And I feel
Exactly.
like that's the point of your point of saying that these albums really did have a lot of longevity. Yeah, I mean, I love that Rhythm Nation. It's thematic, and every song kind of like flows together. There's different like themes going on throughout each song, more or less, but the vibe, the tone, the spirit, it's all very consistent. And that's why I think Rhythm Nation is such a respected album to this day.
Oh yes. I mean, we could talk about we could actually do a podcast on just that album. That's how great it is and how classic and timeless. Like every single song, I absolutely love. I think it's truly when we talk about classic albums and essential albums in for pop and R&B, we're talking about that album.
Absolutely. Milli Vanilli, I remember that being a big deal. I remember obviously the Living Color parody,
Hmm.
because they took everyone down a notch. Like
Everybody got some from them.
everybody got them jokes. Everyone. So but also them in the news, and like again our older peers and parents kind of talking about, oh, they weren't singing their songs. And
Hmm.
even there's a Martin episode with one of the singers from Brownstone who was on it. I think it's Nikki. I think that was the
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
when she was on the episode of In Living not In Living Color of Martin. And what happened? So basically, yeah, like she had lost her voice because she has been rehearsing so much because she was about to sing in front of an executive. And then Martin just goes up to her and he was like, look, he was like, listen, Milli Vanilli. Like he was trying to get her to lip sync on her own vocals, just to get this record deal. And I just thought that was funny. It's just, they unfortunately Milli Vanilli, they have unfortunately a tragic story, because I think they could actually really sing, right?
You know what? Sometimes I forget all of the layers of that story, but it definitely is a tragic story. I do think that they were actually able to sing, but maybe they didn't like the producers didn't like their voices. There was something about that where they had these
Mhm.
other people singing for them, but it was such a strange, unusual story as time unfolded.
Yeah, I just think that's the saddest part. I remember everybody remembers Home Alone. That was also within the pop culture stratosphere as well. Like everyone did the hands on the face and scream. I remember it was a movie that we all really loved. For a holiday family movie that with some comedy, it's a good one. It's still solid in my personal
Still,
opinion. I'm sure I would show my kids Home Alone, but
listen, I watch it every year.
wow, I don't do it every year. I think I might have done it in the last couple of years because I'm like, oh, it just reminded me that it's a solid film. Like the script is tight,
Hmm.
it was well acted. Like you can't complain about Home Alone.
Not at all. So, as we move along, let's get to the top of the charts. These are the top 20 hot R&B chart number 1 hits of 1990. Tender Love by Babyface, Rhythm Nation by Janet Jackson, I'll Be Good to You by Quincy Jones featuring Ray Charles and Shaka Khan, Make It Like It Was by Regina Belle, Real Love by Sky, It's Gonna Be Alright by Ruby Turner, Where Do We Go From Here by Stacey Lattisaw and Johnny Gill, Escapade by Janet Jackson, The Secret Garden by Quincy Jones featuring Barry White, El DeBarge, I'll Be Sure, and James Ingram, All Around the World by Lisa Stansfield, Spread My Wings by Troop, Ready or Not by After Seven, Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe, Hold On by En Vogue, The Blues by Tony, Tomorrow by, again, Quincy Jones featuring Tevin Campbell, You Can't Touch This by MC Hammer, All I Do Is Think of You by Troop, You Can't Deny It by Lisa Stansfield, My by Johnny Gill. So these are the top 20. And Ashley, looking back on this top 20, what do you think?
Rhythm Nation is always a standout for me. And remember also the boys parodied Janet's video in one of their videos. I thought that was so
Yes.
cute. Love the energy and the message of the song Rhythm Nation. The Secret Garden by Quincy Jones with Barry White, El DeBarge, I'll Be Sure, James Ingram. I love that. I've always loved that song. Even as a kid, I really, really liked that song. And I forget the award show where they all sang it and everybody lost their
Oh,
minds.
yes.
Yeah.
That
I
was a
don't remember.
moment.
Yeah, but I was like, yeah, I can see why everyone's losing it right now because this is a really it's a such a great slow jam. And recently, El DeBarge, this was on like how YouTube they're doing podcasts now where you
Hmm.
have like video and audio. So he recently, in the past couple of years, discussed working with Quincy Jones on the song and how he worked with him. He worked to the bone, like on writing the song. Like Quincy did not let up. He worked him,
Wow.
and his final take, which you hear on the album, is it was his only take. It was what L considered his warm up, and Quincy used that
Wow.
because but I think the story went is like they were working to write the song, and then he was like, Quincy, I'm tired, I'm going home. He was like, nope, no, nope, we gotta go in the studio. And so he was just like, okay, just give me time to warm up then, man. He was like, give me time, man. So he's warming up, and then Quincy's like, great, you can go home now. He was like, but that was just my like so that's kind of the way he tells the story. Apparently Elle did not like his take on the song, but his is one of my favorites,
Right.
funny
I was
enough.
getting ready to say that first of all, I love El DeBarge. And like to hear him say this was a warm up, I'm like, really? Because it sounds so crisp and so clear and so polished. He
Hmm.
sounds fantastic on that song.
But also, again, another song I was enamored by was Tomorrow, which was Tevin Campbell's song that Quincy Jones produced. It's my favorite song on Back on the Block, besides One Man Woman, which was sang by Sadia Garrett, or hope I'm pronouncing her name right. It's her
Tadia
first name
Garrett.
is Sadia Garrett.
I
Yeah.
think so.
So I love that song too, but Tomorrow is a great single.
Oh, definitely. I just thinking about Tevin and just how he came out there. I mean, this year, the 1990 year in which Tevin had this single with Quincy Jones, and he also did Round and Round, which was produced by
Hmm.
Prince. And so this was really the beginning of just seeing kind of his immeasurable talent. And I look forward to our future episodes where we get to really talk about Tevin.
Absolutely. Of course, we've talked about this personally off record before, but All Around the World by Lisa Stansfield.
Woo!
It was another song that I remember hearing before school. There's nothing much else I can say. It's such a great song.
It's so infectious. Like you
Hmm.
can't not sing that song when
You
you
can't
hear
not
it.
sing it.
You just can't.
E- Exactly. Also, some more honorable mentions for me: "Spread My Wings" by Troop. I love that song, and of course, "Ready or Not" by After Seven.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, for me, I love seeing Real Love by Sky on the List. I think they are super, super underrated, and that particular song is incredibly underrated. So I would encourage anyone to take a listen to that song. It's a really great slow jam. My by Johnny Gill. That's like a Quiet Storm Hall of Famer, in my
Oh,
opinion.
definitely.
Ooh, I mean, I still can see the video, which was a little too grown for me at the time, but I still saw it. And Johnny was just singing. Like I remember being with my parents going on this trip when I was a kid, and the song came on. My mom was just all in it. She was like, "Ooh, that's my song," and my dad was like, "Robin, who is this? Who is this?" Sounded like Teddy Pendergrass, and I was like, "That's Johnny Gill." And it's like that just reminded me like how my parents loved some of the stuff that came out during my time.
Yes.
That's what feels so different now. I think like they appreciated the music that I loved because they could see the legacy and the lineage in it.
You're absolutely thank you for saying that, you are absolutely right. What I appreciate about my mother, she always tried to, like she always wanted to connect with her children.
Hmm.
She still liked what I was listening to, more or
Exactly.
less. Like, she liked some of this stuff she liked some of the stuff Brandy did and, like,
Yeah.
other people. You are so right about that.
It was different. It's just the connective tissue was there in terms of music. Like my dad
Mhm.
was like, he sounds like Teddy, and that made him like Johnny, and like he really thought he was a great singer. But yeah, let's see. Oh, I also love like just think about this. So Bobby Brown kind of takes reign in like the 80s and he really blows up. He's a superstar. Don't Be Cruel is one of the biggest selling albums. His tour, he's everywhere. And then you get to 1990 and who do we have? We have Johnny Gill, we have Ralph Tresvant, and we have Belle Biv DeVoe, all members of New Edition, same year on the charts who've made really big records. I just find that to be really incredible because I don't know how many R&B groups or groups in general can break up and all the members or just separate and all the members have hits, like major hits on the charts. I thought that was really
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, that's a feat I don't think has really happened
Not even the
since.
Temptations. I mean, 1 or
Mhm.
2 members, and maybe there's a few members here and there, but I've never seen where all of them become, like, really big stars in their own right.
Yeah, no, I don't even think this happened with the Wu-Tang Clan, not really.
Not really. Yeah,
I
you're
don't think
right.
so.
You're
Yeah, you have to
right.
I guess you have to be a serious hip hop head to, like, enforce that idea for Wu-Tang, but, like, if you're talking mainstream, probably
Just
not.
hits, right? Like, just having a
Yeah,
hit, like, all literally had a major hit and a hit album.
you're right. A lot of people who are invested in this genre knew these songs easily.
Yes. And all of us who were fans of New Edition were all excited about, what they could do outside of New Edition. I mean, I think that's also interesting, like, Ralph going solo and Johnny and, Rick who could sing, but people never talked about Rick as a singer the same way they talked
Mhm.
about Bobby or Ralph. And so to hear Rick kind of get a chance to be at the forefront of a group was really amazing to me. I also want to go back to the Secret Garden. Yes, definitely a Quiet Storm Hall of Famer, as you pointed out. Incredible collaboration of artists. And I just want to throw out this really cool, fun fact that I learned. According to Al B. Shore, Michael Jackson was supposed to be on this track. So,
Oh gosh.
can you imagine? Like, Mike would have killed it. Because I love when Mike does his like sensuous, like he does his like soulful ballads. I would have loved to hear him on this. How about you?
I don't know if Michael's a collaborator
Ah, interesting.
in this way, so I
Interesting.
can't really see it because the comparable song is "Lady in My Life" off the top if I'm ripping off the top of my
Okay, yeah, I see what you're
head.
saying.
He just seems like he's in his own kind of bottle with kind of like singing these kind of songs. So I don't know if him kind of mixing and mashing it up on here. Because even on We Are the World, like all I could think, even from back then till now,
Hmm.
it's just like, I just want to hear more of Michael. I really don't care about anyone else
Yeah.
on this track. I just want Michael to do the whole song.
Maybe that's what would have been interesting, right? Like, maybe to see what
Yeah.
he would sound like with El DeBarge and James Ingram, like, maybe to see that, because I feel like, you're right. I think about with the Jacksons, the Jackson 5, he was always the lead, right? This would have been a different opportunity for him. So
Mhm.
I would love to hear him sing it, but also I like what you're saying, to just kind of reimagining an idea of him singing in this type of collaboration would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Albie Shore. I think he'll probably come up a lot more as we go on with this show, but
Hmm.
I don't think he gets enough credit for his songwriting skills, what he's been doing behind the scenes a lot especially during the
And
decade.
also, he doesn't get enough credit for his vocals, because all that singing these guys are trying to do right now with these voices, trying to do these falsettos and stuff, like, I hear, like, a lot of influence. Like, I feel like it's not just Michael they're being influenced by, but Albie Shore was doing this for a long time too, and very
Mhm.
well. He had a really great vocal. So let's talk about the Grammys. Airing in 1991, the nominees for the Best R&B Song Grammy of 1990 are My by Johnny Gill, All Right by Janet Jackson, Here and Now by Luther Vandross, I'll Be Good to You by Quincy Jones featuring Ray Charles and Shaka Khan, You Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. And the winner is You Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. Lord help me. I'm ready to fight. Ashley, who would you have selected from this list? And what do you make of this MC Hammer win?
I don't accept this. I'm not a Grammy connoisseur, so I don't know. I've heard people be much more articulate about like the Grammys and questionable choices when it comes to Black artists and music, like how they put people in categories. Better people have said it better than I will
Hmm.
ever do at this moment. But I'm trying to understand what something that is considered rap be put into this category. Like that's what confuses me first of all, which is why I don't think this win is acceptable. It doesn't make any
It
sense
doesn't.
because by this time they did have a rap
Yes,
category.
they did.
So, wh- so how do you compare "You Can't Touch This" with My"? That doesn't make any
It
sense.
it doesn't. I mean, and I like I said, I the only processing for me And like you said, I don't know how they think and operate with categories. Like, I'm not a connoisseur in that way either, an expert, but I'm like, is it because of the Rick James sample? Like, is it because it's a sample of Super Freak and they just got confused? I really don't know. And we're going to see a lot more of this in the future when it comes to Grammys and award shows in this particular category. A lot of rap songs or hip hop oriented songs will be nominated and some possibly winning. So it's really interesting because I think this kind of goes into the idea that we have in our prologue episode about who gets to name what Black people create, and by
Mhm.
deciding who gets to name it, they decide who gets to be categorized.
That's wild to me, but you're right.
That's how I look at this category. Like, it's kind of like an example of what we're trying to talk about, like in terms of what R&B music actually is and what other people think it is.
If anything, to me, this song is more pop
Yes,
than
it's
R&B.
pop rap to me. If I had to give it a category, it's pop rap. But like I said, I don't know how they, the outsider, will see
Mhm.
this. And someone who doesn't necessarily might not love R&B, right? Like, I don't know who is
Yeah.
making decisions on the nominations. These people even like R&B, especially at this time. This is still 1990.
If I had a choice, it would have been Here and Now by Luther Vandross. I think that's a more definitive, from my personal opinion, obviously, I think that's more of a definitive R&B song for 1990. I know you've talked about it before, maybe on the last episode or maybe in our own conversations about how Luther, he wanted his notoriety, and rightfully
Yeah.
so.
He he wanted to be known for what he was great at, and he wanted, I guess he wanted everyone to know that he he seemed to be chasing that number one hit. I think I need to do a little more research maybe for our future podcast episodes, but I know that Luther, probably like many artists of his stature and during this time, felt underappreciated by their peers, especially peers in the mainstream. And so, yeah, I love Luther. My selection, probably, if I could choose the winner for this category, I'd say My by Johnny Gill. I think it's a great merger of traditional R&B and a new school edge and attitude. Johnny's vocals are just really incredible. I miss that kind of singing. Luther, Johnny, those kind of voices. So, listeners, we are now at the deep dive. In this segment, Ashley and I pick 5 songs from 1990 and chop it up for a bit. My first pick is Hold On by En Vogue. It's written by Thomas McElroy, Denzel Foster, Terry Ellis, Cindy Herron, Maxine Jones, Dawn Robinson, and produced by Denzel Foster and Thomas McElroy. I just love this song. I remember when I first got the Born to Sing album, it's because, of course, I heard Hold on the radio, and I saw the music video. I just had to hear more. I think what makes En Vogue such an extraordinary girl group of the 90s is that they were there first. Like, this is 1990. I remember them being like the first group I saw in this capacity at the time. I love that the song starts with this a cappella from Terry Ellis. She does this, it's an incredible powerhouse arrangement of Who's Loving You, written by Smokey Robinson, but I think immortalized by the Jackson 5, particularly Michael Jackson. You're like, wait, what is this? Just like a remake of the song? No. Because very, very quickly after this moment, this crazy funky bass line just comes in. It's a James Brown sample, of course. And the song is like just edgy, and it's got this attitude. Cindy Herron's vocals are just so exquisite. Just the way she sings, the delivery of the song. It's just a really incredible song. I probably could have picked other En Vogue songs from that album, but I feel like sometimes you got to go with the biggest hit. Like that song was
Mhm.
just crazy. It was just crazy, crazy good. And when I think of En Vogue and their impact, just kind of like you start with this group and then you're going to see like, SWV and TLC and all these people that come after. But when I think of En Vogue, I think of who came before. And I'm like, you see this lineage, like I see the Supremes, I see the Emotions, and I especially see the Jones Girls when I think of them.
Hmm.
And like, I love that there's this connective tissue. These women had like these incredibly beautiful harmonies, which reminded me so much of the Jones Girls and the Emotions. And then you have them singing in this really street edgy, with this edgy attitude in this very beautiful way. I don't know. I just really love this song. Ashley, what do you think of Hold On?
Yeah, even when you talk about influences, I even hear the Jazzy Fat Nasties who were based in Philly as artists, but I think they're from different states. I think they're actually from the West Coast. I think they're from California.
Okay.
But I feel like the Jazzy Fat Nasties also have this, I hear En Vogue in them as well.
Mm,
Even though they're a duo, they have these very powerful voices, and that's separate, they're very distinct, and they harmonize so beautifully. As far as Hold On, oh my god, absolutely. It was everywhere. It was on the radio constantly. All me and my friends at summer camp loved listening to the song. Yeah, I feel like Hold On was so ingrained in my social world
mm-hmm.
and then my like music consumption world as well. So I really love the song. I was really taken aback, even as a younger person, with like how strong their voices were, how well they sang together.
Yes.
I was incredibly impressed. I was almost intimidatingly impressed.
Really.
But I really love their music, and I love that song.
Yes. Just one more thing, like they were so sophisticated. I think that was also really interesting to me. I was just kind of in awe of how sophisticated they look and how like grown up they looked. Like they had it all together. And I say this because whoever's first, whoever comes out early, the next girl group is going to be a complete reaction to that later, which we'll talk about with TLC, right? And so
Yeah.
like, I just wish, I don't know, I feel like we don't talk about certain groups enough. Maybe we don't talk about anybody enough, but En Vogue is definitely deserving of their flowers, their opportunity to be in some type of major some award show where they get an opportunity to be celebrated for all that they've given R&B music. And I think like with this song, you see clearly the beginning of a really promising career in music. Like this song really does set it off for them. So my next pick is It Never Rains in Southern California by Tony, written by Timothy Riley, Raphael Sadiq, and Charlie Ray Wiggins. I chose this song because it really stands out during this period. I feel like Tony were just in their own lane completely. For me, they're up there with Jodeci as probably my favorite R&B male group of the 90s, especially got so much love for Raphael Sadiq, who I think is one of the best producers, songwriters in the game. And I also just absolutely love his voice. Listen, just the title stands out. Like, you listen to the radio and you hear a song called It Never Rains in Southern California. Like, you have to think about what is this even about? But it's an incredibly beautiful song. I mean, like I said, Raphael's vocals, the background vocals, there's poetry in these lyrics, and the arrangement itself is really, really unique. This to me is like proto neo soul. It's not quite the neo soul we hear with D'Angelo, we hear with Erica Badu and Maxwell later on, but to me it has the underpinnings of that sound, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I I also think about this song, and it makes me think about Loose Ends. Do you remember that 80s
Yeah,
group? Like
I
I
totally do.
feel a little bit of that in this too. Like there's something about this type of soulfulness, this sound. It's almost like an alternative to the R&B of the time, of the mainstream. And I've also heard folks call this song West Coast soul, just kind of like a laid back, more breezy type of soul music. I love that it's just not, it just doesn't sound like the mainstream at all. It doesn't sound like what's on MTV or what's on BET. It's really its own thing. And Tony have always really, to me, been their own thing. They're really good at like dabbling into what's popular, and then they take it and make it their own. Like it always just sounds like them. I find that especially with this song, they took a lot of risks musically that nobody was really taking in 1990. And I think it's just a dope song. How about you?
Absolutely. This is another song that I actually do like. I don't know how many songs. I'm curious what songs we're gonna like wrestle with each other, where we're gonna be on opposite ends. But I mean, this is the song on the album, The Revival, right?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. So this is probably my favorite song on that album. I agree with everything that you said. I don't think I have anything else to particularly add. because you said everything that I probably would have said. Again, when I talked earlier about my appreciation for the newer artists that are doing R&B today, it's people like, for example, Devin Morrison, who I love Devin Morrison. And what did he do recently? He did his own cover of It Never Rains in Southern California. I love that
See,
man.
look at that.
Yeah, exactly. It's the people who are not like paying homage but doing their own thing, but it sounds very 21st century. And that's what I love about his music. It sounds older, but it sounds newer. And he also can actually sing. You actually hear his vocals and in his tracks. And that's what I love about him. So again, this is all attributed to, probably he's very much influenced by Tony as well.
Oh, definitely. I love hearing that these younger artists are being influenced by the music of the past and finding new ways to reimagine the sound and bring it into a new generation. So, moving on to pick number three, I Just Want to Hold You by Jasmine Guy. Yes, y'all, that Jasmine Guy. Whitley from A Different World, Jasmine Guy. She had a self titled album, and the only studio release that she had. I selected the song because I know very few people probably remember that Jasmine Guy had an album and some minor hits, I think, on that album. But particularly, I love the song I Just Want to Hold You. What I remember is going to Harlem with my parents. They used to have all these cassette tapes laid out on the streets, and it'd be like four for $20.
Yeah, we had the same thing here.
So you already know.
Yeah.
That was the first time I purchased it, the self-titled album. And this song, I Just Want to Hold You, was on the album. And I just fell in love with it. The song is written by Melanie Andrews, Tony Andrews, Cal Harris Jr., and it's produced by Rex Salas. It didn't chart, I don't think, until 91. But like I said, 1990 is when the album came out. And it's the first time I'd heard it. I don't know. I think it's such a beautiful song. And I actually think like Jasmine's voice is just really beautiful on this. It's tender and it exuded this warmth, and it was so different from the character that she played on A Different World. I think as well, and maybe a lot of people might remember this, but it was really, really hard for an actor to be taken seriously as a singer pre-Brandy, right? It was
Hmm.
hard. I mean, I know Eddie Murphy had a huge hit in the 80s, but I don't think people took him seriously as
People
a
did not
singer,
take him
right?
seriously. And then he did that song with Michael Jackson, What's Up With You? And everyone just
Oh
like, man, this
man,
clown.
they just
Yeah.
clowned him forever about that.
Hmm.
So I say this to say that I think I give Jasmine a lot for trying to do this and knowing that, it was really, really hard to be taken seriously as a musician as well as an actor. I think this song is especially made for like the Quiet Storm, which, like I said, we've talked about in our prologue. Like we both just really love that Quiet Storm sound, and so maybe that's why this song just sticks with me the way it does. James Ingram is actually on the song at the very end. He accompanies her, and they sound really, really good together. I bring the song up because it's totally an overlooked gem. Were you familiar with this one, Ashley?
Yeah, you're right about it being overlooked, because I don't think I was even aware that Jasmine Guy had an album out. So until you had put it down on the books, that's when I was just like, well, let me go to Spotify and check it out. And I'm like, oh, I like this song. Like, I actually really
Yay!
do like it. So I didn't know about this. It was the same thing when Tisha Campbell, her first album, not the other thing that people make fun of now. I forget, she did that I'm Still Here.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh man, poor Tisha. But like the other song that she did, like that You Got to Push, like
Yes,
that song. But then they did it on Martin,
Martin.
and that was
And every time I hear
so.
someone say push, I just think of Martin on the talent show
Mhm.
episode. And I'm see.
Pretty much. So yeah, I think this is why this is again pre-Brandy. This is why I think people who could actually sing but were also more so known for acting had a hard time. So to discover that Jasmine Guy, now I knew that she sang because I watched her Unsung. I think it was the Unsung Hollywood.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right.
So I knew that she had an album. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I never knew that, but I never heard I Just Want to Hold You until you had mentioned it, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is nice, and this is totally Quiet Storm notable.
Yay. I love putting people onto that song. So I'm so glad you loved it or liked it. Moving on to number 4. I Like the Way Kissing Game by High Five. It was written by Teddy Riley, Bernard Bell, and David Way, produced by Teddy Riley. Okay, so I'm gonna just say it. For me, this is probably up there in my top 5 R&B songs of 1990. I love it. I love this song so much. It feels like my youth, like if I'm talking like an old person, but it just feels like it, right? It just makes me feel, it reminds me of when I was a kid. It reminds me of this kind of summer day kind of song. Like I always say to people, like this is like 100% cookout jam because it has this kind of breezy, summery feel to it. There's an innocence to it in this way. I think that's what really makes it interesting for me. So like I look at High Five is a group of teens at this point making music, but there's nothing in this song to me personally that feels like it's a teeny bopper or a bubblegum song. Like I remember everybody liking this song and everybody acknowledging how great it was. To me, that's due to Tony Thompson, the late Tony Thompson's vocals, similarly to what you were saying about Tevin Campbell, who dropped Round and Round this year as well. I think about them having these similar voices. I know they're distinct. I can recognize who's who, but there's something that they're both doing to me in terms of like how they approach a song. I find that they have this very similar delivery of like maturity and vulnerability that you don't really hear in a lot of male vocalists this way. I think that's what allows High Five to kind of have this sound that never comes across as bubblegum or teeny bopper, despite how young they were at the time. There really is a timelessness to this song. And when I think about Teddy Riley being the producer of this, it stands apart from his other like really kind of hard hitting tracks. The New Jack Swing sound was really hard hitting. There was a lot of like hardcore dancing, like that you had to do. You had to be able to dance to really listen to enjoy these songs. I think what's so beautiful about this song is so dreamy. Like there's a dreaminess to this song. It doesn't have any attitude. It's really just heart. I think, like I said, it has so much to do with Tony Thompson's vocals and the way in which Teddy Riley put this track together. When I hear it, I always think of what could have been for Tony Thompson. He did have he had a solo career briefly, but I feel like if he had the right production team, probably would have had a really solid solo career. This song never gets old for me. I think I've heard it 1,000 times in my life, and I'll probably hear it 1,000 more and just continue to love it. How about you, Ashley?
Yeah, I've been having a hard time trying to not sing the first few lyrics because I love this song so
Yay.
much.
All right. And my next pick is All Around the World by Lisa Stansfield, written by Lisa Stansfield, Ian Devaney, and Andy Morris, produced by Ian Devaney and Andy Morris. Ashley, Lisa told us that she does not know where her baby is. But she said she's going to find him. And you know what? When you hear the song, you want her to find him, right? Like there is something so magical about a song that you just have to sing, right? Like this song to me is just so infectious. It's a bop. Like when they mention the word bop, like this song is somewhere in the dictionary for real because it's one of the best songs of that year. Like I said, my top 5, this is up in there in that top 5 of 1990. Listen, we got a blue-eyed soul singer, a British soul singer at that. And if we're going to have a conversation about blue-eyed soul and British soul, then Lisa will always be in the conversation. This was everywhere on radio, but like especially Black radio. And we embraced it. Black listeners love this song. And if you need any evidence, I try to tell people, watch YouTube and look at her performance on the Apollo. The audience was singing louder than she was. That was such a special moment. I think I heard somebody say on Twitter that song and performance should have cured racism.
Yeah,
Like,
I love that.
when you see it, you'll see why they said it. It's kind of incredible, like the way in which she was able to bring this beautiful British soul vibe and emerge it with R&B in this way and create a really phenomenal hit. I think of Teena Marie when I think about when the first time I heard this song. I think about how I don't think anyone knew Lisa was white until they saw the video, right? Like I always think about that. I know I didn't think she was white until I saw the video because it was on BET and not MTV.
For some reason, I wasn't surprised that to see her that she was white. I can't take credit for this term, but spicy white. Like that, I was like, okay, that tracks. Right, that tracks.
And when you hear the song, those eyes are so contagious. Like, how do you keep your mouth closed? You can't. Lisa is a singer. She has this incredible range. Her vocals are just really gorgeous. And I remember reading this a few years ago, but apparently the song is kind of a tribute to Barry White, like his orchestration of a song. And if you
Mm.
listen to the orchestration in the song and go play some Barry White, you can really see how like influenced and inspired she and her husband were apparently to make the song. Yes, Lisa was not really looking for her baby. She totally made it up. She already had a baby. She had a man, but you believed it when you heard it in the song. And I love that it's kind of this tribute to Barry White's influence because once again, we're talking about legacy. I think what she did with the opening monologue to the song, she said that in itself was like of course, what Barry was known for. So she was saying that she did that opening monologue as a tribute to Barry White, which I think is really dope. Also, I guess we can go back into just saying like this wasn't New Jack Swing. This didn't have a like contemporary flair to it, but everybody still loved it. Young people, old people, it fell into that groove where everybody was just singing it from every age. It wasn't geared towards young people. It was definitely geared to a mature crowd, but I think everybody loved it. Everybody knew it.
I was gonna say, I love a good opening monologue. I'm going to talk about one of my favorites a few years down the line when we get to it. I'll let you know. But yeah, this is a really great opening monologue. Very fascinating that she was influenced by Barry White. Now that you say that, I totally hear it. I hear it in the music, I hear it in the lyrics. And you're right, young and old, my experience, everyone loved this song. So for my 5 picks, I decided to go a little left of center and to go with the non-hits, but to go with songs that I think are deserving of recognition and for people to give a listen. So my first choice is Layla Hathaway's Smile, which is from her debut album, which I believe is self-titled. A lot of people know her to be Donny Hathaway's daughter, who I think we've talked about him in the prologue as one of the best singers to ever do the craft, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Layla lives up to that in her own unique way. So I was put on to Layla Hathaway by a friend's husband a long time ago. And so I started to kind of like dig through her crates and listen to more. Because I think the first song I heard was Forever Always Love. I went back and listened to more. And Smile is just a very sweet song. Did you listen to the song? Have you heard it
Yeah.
before?
You know what? I hadn't heard it before. I wasn't familiar with the song until you chose it and I listened to it. It's a really sweet song. There's this kind of breeziness and jazz. It's like a jazzy song, right? And
Hmm.
I love her voice. She is an incredible singer. So it's a really beautiful song. The song kind of made me think of the band Incognito, another kind of left of center R&B band.
Yes.
I really dug it because I really like Incognito. So I thought it was just really light and airy and really pretty.
I think that's again very much what of course what was going to be come up. What's going to come up later is this idea of R&B kind of jazz fusion or mix that some artists decided to do during this period, and just kind of like this is my artistic POV and this is the kind of music I want to do. And so Layla Hathaway definitely, yeah, and almost all of her albums she has that incorporated. It sounds like R&B, but it also sounds like jazz
Hmm.
and that adult contemporary kind of vibe that we were talking about before. As far as my second choice, I chose Take Six. It's a song called I Love EU. So Take Six is more gospel and they're a cappella. They really don't have instrumentals. that are backing them. And this song was produced by Mervyn Warren, who also sang and song wrote for Take Six, but he left in 1991 to pursue producing more. So he's produced for acts like Yolanda Adams, Whitney Houston, As Yet, Queen Latifah, BB and CC Winans, and of course MJ. And mainly it's inspirational music. So I think that was his mode, like gospel, inspirational, kind of the uplifting song. So Take Six has an accessibility that, again, maybe even echoes a little bit, if I wanted to give a comparison, what Boys to Men can do
Mm-hmm.
and like on a song like It's So Hard to Say Goodbye. So that's kind of what Take Six sounds like if I were to make that comparison. But those harmonies is what it's really what has given them, I think, the notoriety that they did have for a period of time. So I just think it's a great song, and that's what I like. I like Put Your Trust in Me because I love you, and I just think that's fantastic.
I wasn't actually familiar with this one either, but I really liked it when I heard it, and I was like, I'm so glad you selected it. I love the kind of pop doo-wop vibe of it, and I can totally
Mhm.
hear that Boys to Men, like you said, that comparison, and it's there. And yeah, that was a great comparison. I think it's vocally just so strong. Like, they were singing,
Mhm.
okay? It doesn't feel like anything on the radio from 1990. I mean, these guys are clearly doing their own thing. Doesn't sound like you said, like what we consider a very like a more traditional gospel style either. It has an accessibility to it, a more pop accessibility to it, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I think it works very well for me. Next is more of a song that a lot of people probably would recognize who are into this genre, which is Jane Child's Don't Want to Fall in Love. This is one of those songs, again, if you know this genre well enough, you hear it and you're just like, "Oh yeah, I remember this song." Like I feel like that it's one of those songs that falls into that category. So Jane Child is actually from Toronto, but there was also a New Jack Swing remix, which I didn't know about, and that was produced by Teddy Riley. I thought this was an interesting story about this remix because apparently, when Teddy was working on this remix, this was his self proclaimed career and personal low. He wasn't really feeling good about his music and the business. He did this remix, and the success of the remix, the success of the song itself, it helped him realize that music was his purpose. It was where he was supposed to be and what he was supposed to be doing. And I find that really fascinating because you think of Teddy Riley, and even from the Barry Michael Cooper article, he makes it sound like Teddy Riley was on top of the world his entire career tenure, but that wasn't always true. According to Riley himself, there were some times where he really had some bumps in the road. And so the New Jack Swing remix of Don't Want to Fall in Love really it revitalized him. And that's really great to hear. It's always we talk about this a lot personally. It's always sometimes when we're not feeling great about our art, here comes the universe, whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
call it, given because this it's a person, it's a acceptance of something, it's a yes, it's something that tells us, oh, okay, we're on the right track. And so it's really great to hear that this was the song for it because this song is fantastic. And I also wanted to mention about what Barry Michael Cooper said in the article. I love the way he described New Jack Swing. And I wanted to emphasize this because Cooper said it was, quote, a mix of rap, gospel, jazz, funk, go go, and gothic romanticism by way of synthesizers, end quote. Like, that is the gothic romanticism took me all the way out when I first
I'm
read the
still stuck
article.
on it, honestly.
I think that is so that's a beautiful way of putting it. Like that if you
Yeah,
want to elevator pitch New Jack Swing and like just use that line and cuz I just think that's fantastic. I never thought of it that way, but yeah,
me neither.
I could totally see that in a lot of the songs and the albums that we hear and that we're going to be talking about. Also, Don't Want to Fall in Love made it to number 6 on the R&B chart, so that's also worth mentioning as well.
I'm so glad you chose this song. I love this song, and I remember the video so well. But honestly, you know what? The first time I heard this on the radio, I thought it was Taylor Dane.
Yeah, I could see that. I
I
could see
just
that.
it just felt like one of her songs, another incredible Blue Eyed Soul singer. But yeah, I just thought it was her. But then I see this video and there's Jane Child, this punk rock looking woman walking down, no, strutting down the New York streets, singing like her life depended on it. The song was huge. I really love it. And probably in my category, maybe for one of my favorite one hit wonders of all time. Like, I just think the song is great.
My second to last pick is by a singer named Karen Wheeler, and she did a song called Living in the Light. Now, if you don't know the name Karen Wheeler, you probably know the group she sang for, which was Soul to Soul, which did Keep On Moving and
Back to life, back to reality.
That's right. So Karen Wheeler is another fun fact about her is that she sang backup for Phil Collins. But
Oh,
yeah, but Living in the Light, again, it was probably one of those music videos that came on late at night. And the Living in the Light is basically a celebratory song about Black people's resilience in the face of the Middle Passage. And these are the kind of images that the video evokes. You see Black people on the shore of a beach, breaking chains, all that kind of stuff. And Karen Wheeler, you could probably also say she is proto neo soul as well.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I totally put Soul to Soul in that category, Karen Wheeler in that category. I'm really glad you picked this song. I hadn't heard it in a really long time. I actually remember it. Like I said, oh yes, Living in the Light, because I remember it having this kind of, it was R&B, but also had like a dance pop vibe to it, right? Like
Yeah.
it was really upbeat. Like there's like this real full instrumentation to it. And the thing I loved about Soul to Soul, and of course with Karen Wheeler singing, is like she has such a kind of a dynamic vocal range. I just love the way she sings in her very specific style.
Right on. Last but not least, the Rude Boys written all over your face. So, funny enough, this is a song. I don't know what it was about this song, but I picked it again because I think it is well worth noting. And also the group's mentor, Gerald Levert, who, puts his own imprint on the song in order for people to really, I guess, to perk ears. But the song I think would have done it without it. Again, I'm trying very hard not to sing right now because I really want to sing this. It's such a
Me
good
too.
song. It's really great.
Listen, Gerald Levert wrote them a hit. Like, this is such a great song, but he also, in my opinion, he totally hijacks the song from them. Like, Gerald sang, he was singing like his rent was due. Like, I'm like, Gerald, did you have to go this hard? But yes, he did, because that's what we know of Gerald Levert, and that's why we love him. And that's why, to me, this song, yeah, it probably would have been a hit regardless, because it is kind of this really contagious, like, bop that we hear. The tempo, the vibe of the song is really infectious. You want to sing it when you hear it. But I also think, like, Gerald putting that extra sauce on it, it does makes the song even better. Like, I love that Gerald sang like that on it, and I love that he, gave them this really, really great song to kind of stand out in.
Absolutely.
And now we're moving on to our legacies segment. With our legacy segment, we just want to have longer discussions about recording artists, careers, albums, moments, and movements in the 90s, trying to add nuance and to contextualize music history for y'all. Because this music history is massive and we can't dismiss it. Let's embrace it and all its complexities. For the first segment, I really want to discuss Teena Marie and the Ivory album. Just to give listeners a quick history of Teena Marie, because I can't assume everyone listening is familiar with her. Teena Marie is perhaps the most Black famous white artist of all time. And it's hard to explain this relationship, actually kinship she has with Black music fans. We see her as family. It's just different with Teena. Rare that a white artist is mostly known and adored by a Black fan base, and few white people know or acknowledge her. Like that imaginary cookout that Black folks keep inviting their favorite white folks to? Well, Teena needs no cookout invite. She's already there with your aunties talking trash at the spades table. She is, it's true. She is one of my favorite vocalists of all time, a favorite artist who I've only grown to love and appreciate her music more and more over the years. Some of my favorite songs ever actually are Teena Marie songs. Ashley, you have any Tina Marie reflection before we get down into it?
Teena Marie is like none other. And she's so celebrated. I heard her music long before I saw her face. It wasn't me just hearing her music, but I also very much enjoyed it. I love the disco elements to it. I love her
Hmm.
collaborations with Rick James, but I also love the uplifting kind of spirit in her vocals and in her lyrics as well.
No, it's true, and that's why I was really, excited to actually talk about her in this piece because we're talking about lineage and legacy. So she started with Motown and was mentored by Rick James during her rise. She is most known for her post-disco era hits like I Need Your Lovin', It Must Be Magic, and her sultry ballads like Portuguese Love, Irons in the Fire, and of course her duet with Rick James, Fire and Desire, which is an earth-scorching ballad to put it mildly. One of her biggest Black radio jams in the 80s was Square Biz. Her only crossover hit was Lover Girl, which peaked at number 4 on Billboard in 1984. And you all may be familiar with her song Ooh La La, which was sampled by the Fugees. 1990 was a strange time for many artists who were most prominent in the 80s. So many artists had a hard time finding their footing in the 90s. Teena Marie was one of them. This is the year she released the album Ivory, which was seen as a critical and commercial flop. So when I went back and listened to the album to do a reassessment, it may have been a commercial flop, but there are a few of my favorite Teena Marie ballads on here. If I Were a Bell and Miracles Need Wings to Fly. I think perhaps what may have been jarring for her fans at this time was her attempt at New Jack Swing. With some fan bases, they don't want their artists to change too much or take too many risks. They rely on them for a certain sound and feeling. I don't think the up-tempo stuff works as well as the ballads. I think this happens with so many artists as they try to transcend new decades. Things change, and what changed most in the 90s was technology, which I believe really affected the way artists would sound. I think it's super hard for artists to figure out how to remain relevant in a new era and also stay true to themselves. This perhaps was a period where Tina Marie was wrestling with this. Ironically, I think of the two white artists we both brought up, Lisa Stansfield and Jane Child, who both had breakout success on Black radio and the pop charts with their contemporary R&B. Lisa more traditionally, and Jane with a New Jack Swing approach. Somehow, Tina Marie couldn't find her footing in this. And we also have to think about the label she was on and what kind of pressure she might have been under. Any thoughts, Ashley, on the Ivory album?
I had no knowledge of this album. If I Were a Bell played on the radio, so I knew that song, but I never attached it to an album. When you talked about bringing this particular album up, I went back and listened. Like you said, Ivory sounds like very much of its time. So listening to it, I wasn't confident with the combination of Tina's voice with the overall artistic style
Mm-hmm.
because it just this didn't mesh well for me at all. So Just Us Two was the other only track on that album that I liked, and I'm like, oh, okay, this sounds more like her, but it also still sounds like it's very 1990. What I want to mention, which I think is very important for people to, if they want to do more digging, musician and writer Tim Dillinger and Craig Seymour, they had a conversation about Tina called Cultivating Blackness, a conversation about Teena Marie. And this was on Craig's podcast that's still available. And I bring it up because the essay that sparked this conversation, the inspired it, was Tim's personal essay on Teena Marie Remembrance, which is what the essay is called. And he did it for soulmusic.com. And it's about Tim's personal relationship with Tina and her music. And it's such, first of all, the essay, don't read it if you're in your feelings, because it really will bring you to tears. Tim is such a phenomenal writer, and their conversation is so complex and layered. They really dig into what Tina means as far as identity, as far as music, as far as even the business of entertainment itself. And so it's going to be linked obviously in the show notes, but please do yourself a service and listen to that conversation.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. There are so many layers when we do discuss Tina Marie and her music. That's why I really wanted to bring her up in this legacies portion because I remember when I first heard the album and I was like, wow, this is 1990. I remember assuming it came out in the 80s just because you kind of forget like how people's careers have these trajectories. And I knew If I Were a Bell. I knew I think it's Just Us Two. I knew those
Hmm.
songs. And so it's like, oh, putting into this context of this album is really interesting. Like I said, I think the album is just really uneven. Like you really do feel a lot of Teena in it, but you also feel like there's like a lot of pressure to sound contemporary in a
Yeah.
way that maybe wasn't true to how she maybe wanted to sound. Like I said, I always think about record labels and the kind of pressure they would put on artists during those times. What I'll say before we get to the next segment is what's so fascinating is that Teena Marie does eventually return to Black radio in a major way and with a critically acclaimed album, but it happens in 2004 and on Cash Money Records. So eventually she found a way to bring what fans loved, but also add this like contemporary flavor to her sound. And we miss Teena Marie around here. I know I do. She's
Yeah.
very, very well missed, very heavily missed.
That's why she's so revered by Black folks. Like she just does it. She does R&B and disco and soul music so
So
well.
well, with such an
And that's
appreciation for it.
yeah, and that's just an understatement.
Truly, truly. Moving on, Whitney Houston, as she attempts to redefine her career in 1990 with R&B after Backlash. Teena Marie is the extremely rare white artist who had this immense adoration from a Black fan base. And on the flip side, there's Whitney Houston, a Black artist who during this time had a far more complicated relationship with Black music listeners. Let's first just say it. Whitney Houston was one of the greatest singers on the planet. No one can take that from her. We talk about God given vocalists, when we talk about someone who came out of the church with that ability to convey spiritual conviction in any song, we are talking about Whitney Houston, hands down, an untouchable vocal force. And with that being said, I think so much of the tension of her early career has been about the expectations of having this dynamic vocal ability translate into pop appeal and success. I think what we see in the early 80s with the albums is producer Clive Davis hell bent on making Whitney this huge pop sensation. And I've always said my favorite Whitney songs are her R&B songs. And I'm thinking many Black listeners of that time probably felt the same way. But woo, times were different and much crueler because there were so many impossible expectations on Black celebrities. Wait a minute, maybe times haven't changed that much. But back then, and I guess now, the bigger the celebrity, the more impossible the expectations. And as a kid during that time, I was far too young to understand all of this. So I was shocked by her being booed by some audience members at the 1988 Soul Train Awards and folks calling her Whitey Houston. A lot of Black people saw her as a sellout, criticized for not being Black enough or being soulless. Now remember, other Black artists were having pop success then as well. You had Michael, Prince, and Janet, to name a few. But somehow, Whitney was singled out as being a sellout. And as we know now from all the books and the documentaries and the TV films, this deeply devastated her. She never wanted to lose her connection to Black audiences. In 1990, it seems that she worked to get that connection back. The song I'm Your Baby Tonight felt like an attempt to play to Black audiences and to mainstream audiences at once. Did she succeed? Well, I'll say that her working with Babyface and L.A. Reid was a match made in heaven. I'm Your Baby Tonight, the song, skyrocketed on the R&B charts and the pop charts. She sounds very soulful on this. Even when I remember the video, she looked edgier. It's interesting that Whitney knew the way to reclaim her connection to Black music listeners was through R&B, which meant getting back on Black radio. I love the song, and her vocal gymnastics on the song are just glorious. Much was shifting in R&B during this time as well, because Poison by BBD came out this year too. I'm Your Baby Tonight sounds a bit out of step with that when you think about it. But at the same time, I think Whitney possibly felt assured by being back strongly on Black radio. Like the song did what it needed to do. The song knew the assignment, right? We'll see more of Whitney during this decade and her evolving relationship to R&B. And I look forward to speaking more about that as the time comes. Ashley, your thoughts on Whitney Houston during this time. What did you think about Your Baby Tonight?
I'm Your Baby Tonight was the first Whitney Houston song that I definitively remember actually liking. I've gained a bigger appreciation for Whitney as an adult. I'm also astronomically and fervently empathetic to her as well. I think there was this intuitiveness that Black audiences, more or less, some more than others, had about the inauthenticity of it all. I think we saw her as a Barbie doll that was taken off the shelf and put in a music video. And she can sing her butt off. She could always sing, but she seemed so marketed. She seemed more like a product and not a person. And
Mm.
that particular group of people at the Soul Train Awards, that's what they were booing. They were booing the idea that this wasn't who she really was. This is like, why are you like the idea of quote selling out, if you could say that. But looking back now, I don't think Whitney had much of a choice. I think she was kind of like
Hmm.
going with what was going to propel her career. And I say that because like I feel like everything Michael did was Michael. Nothing seemed inauthentic about Michael's different directions and what he did with his career. And who was going to tell Prince to be anything he was not? That was just not going to happen in any way, shape, form, or fashion. It just kind of kills me. And I think it's so sad that this orbit around Whitney engineered this image of her that kind of stifled her creativity and authenticity. If I were to throw out this wild theory, I feel like those boos, I think that helped Whitney. And what I mean by that is, I think she used that to leverage the losing of listeners. I think she was like, well, they don't like me, so you're going to let me do what I want to do. And I'm going to get all those listeners back and keep the listeners that I already have to even propel myself
Mm.
even more. And so I think that's why we get an I'm Your Baby Tonight, because I think that's a beautiful fusion of this can be crossover, but this also sounds very much like the sound that appeals to Black listeners during this time. And that's just my theory.
No, I really love that theory. And I also think about it for myself. I mean, I have a very different experience with Whitney. I loved her R&B stuff. I think my first favorite Whitney song is You Give Good Love. I think it's still actually probably still my absolute favorite Whitney song. I think it's just vocally amazing, and I love how soulful it is. But yeah, it's to me it's so interesting how we look at someone's career in retrospect versus how we have lived it and watched it as time has gone on. And I notice, the way in which she's discussed in retrospect is so different than how she was received during the time that we were growing up, right? And I I liked her music, but more on a surface level at this point, right? Like the hits came on and I enjoyed them. I think my deeper appreciation grew as she continued to make music. I mean, this is before I Will Always Love You, right?
Hmm.
So she hasn't even had that yet. And it's almost hard to think about Whitney before that moment because the I Will Always Love You bodyguard period is really defining of Whitney's career, right? And what she was able to do after that. But yes, I deeply feel for Whitney and what she has gone through. I think I chose to highlight this particular segment because I thought it was really important to remember she didn't always receive the love that she should have, right?
Yes.
She wasn't always able to be the person that we remember. Like you said, at one point it felt very boxed in. It was very image conscious and she had to sound this way and look this way. And when she got with Bobby, it's like the gloves came off, right? Like she just got a whole nother version of her. And the version of her we got felt so much more accessible. And I think that's the version of her for me. Even though she was wrestling with these things, you felt like you kind of, okay, this is who Whitney is. This is how we knew her. There's this attitude, there's this thing that we're familiar with suddenly. I harken back to, like I said, I'm Your Baby Tonight, just because I feel like there's a very interesting thing happening here where you're seeing a transition in how she's seeing herself in music as someone who wants to make sure she does not lose her Black fan base.
When she did that cover of I'm Every Woman, I was like, this is it. Like I have deprived myself of Whitney too much.
And we will
Never
definitely
again.
be talking about that.
Never again. Because I first of all, obviously I love the original, but when she did that cover, oh my, I was in love. I was in love.
That's it. And like I said, listeners, we are definitely going to be covering I'm every woman for real, because yeah, that's next level.
As we're talking about all of these particular artists who were trying to find their footing in this new decade, there's one artist that didn't waver at all. That Detroit attitude, that grit, I will mention that term again, is very steadfast. And that's Anita Baker. That's Compositions. That's that album that I personally feel is her best. I'm going to argue that is her best album. She once asked herself, how do I do something different yet maintain my style? And she asked herself this before recording the album. This album that would openly embrace her listeners like a warm hug on a brisk day and usher us into a new decade with a familiar flair but elevated approach. While a good share of artists who peaked on charts and airwaves in the 1970s and 1980s saw collaboration with producers who heralded an era of a more youthful and upbeat sound, you had Anita Baker, with all of her grit and possible perfectionist tendencies, embrace the wide open lane to flourish further upon her previous exemplary pieces, Rapture and Giving You the Best That I've Got. Baker's fourth Grammy winning platinum selling masterpiece, Compositions, was another successful collaboration with her producer and musician, Michael J. Powell, experimenting with these old school recording techniques like singing live along a rhythm section, on site songwriting, which Baker was heavily involved in, and she's noted herself, it gave her a confidence that she didn't know that she had. And it shows. For all of her methodical and focused, these are Baker's words, planning to create this work, she understood the risk of not being pop or having a hit list of tracks. Give it time to sink in, she suggested. Compositions is again transformative for me because I am her target listener. More so as an adult, but you get my drift. All 9 songs are immersive and demand an attentive journey, and Baker's lack of concern about fitting a timely sound, letting her work breathe with a and say something low-key attitude is exactly the kind of approach that fits my own personal ethics, which is why I love this album and I love Anita. So, Robin, do you have any thoughts on Compositions? Do you remember it from 1990 specifically?
Okay, so I love Compositions. A few of my favorite Anita songs are up there, like Talk to Me, Whatever It Takes, and Fairy Tale. She sounds at the top of her game on this album. It's intimate, it's personal, it's also really grown. So for me in 1990, I definitely wasn't the listener that she was looking for, of course, but I grew to appreciate this. I remember one of my friends, her mom loved Anita Baker and played her a lot. So I just was like hearing Anita at that time, but not really taking it in, if that makes any sense,
Mm-hmm.
until I got a little older. So I really grew to appreciate her as I got older, and the significance of her music and how much I really began to really love her music. I mean, I was a fan from Rapture. I love that this album doesn't feel like anything else in 1990. We discussed this immense pressure that artists were facing who were coming out of the 80s and into the 90s, trying to incorporate, as we've said, a more youthful sound. And there's Anita Baker, she's the queen of the quiet storm, and she's doing the opposite. She's making the music she wanted, the way she wanted. I think that's amazing.
So I heard her through the grapevine. This is a segment where we're just going to be talking about these kind of fun little stories. So Robin, what you done heard through the grapevine?
Well, I done heard that Babyface originally wrote My for After Seven. As you know, 2 of the members of the group are his brothers. And apparently, because they were late or they didn't arrive to the studio on time, the song was given to Johnny Gill, which became, of course, a huge hit for him. Now, I'm actually glad this happened. Not that After Seven wouldn't have done the song justice. I think they would have sung it well. But Johnny Gill and what this song did for him and his career, I mean, I feel like some things happen for a reason?
Yeah, it's so funny how many accidents happen when you're working when you're a creative person. The things that feel or seem intentional that become these big successes could just
Hmm.
be complete circumstance and fate. Like, it just so happened that this didn't happen or that happened. And I just find that really fascinating, honestly. The creative process is really a mystery.
It is.
So my story is a story that I've come to really love. I've been looking a bit more at Tony Terry recently, and you all know that song that I mentioned last episode. His song "With You" is a really fantastic ballad, and it was released in 1990. But the reason we have the video is because of Anita Baker. So I think the story goes she heard it in the middle of the night and it woke her up. And she was able to contact Tony directly, and she was on the phone with him. She was like, "This song is so beautiful, and when's the video coming out?" And he was like, There's no video, there's no budget." And she was just like, "Well, not on my watch." And she made sure Blair Underwood was the director, and she wrote the
Wow.
check for the video for $50,000. She gave the video its entire budget, and she became the executive producer of the video. So again, I
Wow.
love that because an artist who believes in another artist and is so inspired by their own vocals and effort and talent and just decides to go, "I'm going to make sure that more people hear this because it's so great."
I love hearing that. Makes me love Anita Baker even more. The only rumor, I heard about this song, and I'm not sure if it's true, but that Tony Terry wrote this song for his daughter. And
Oh,
so I was like, that just adds an extra sense of sweetness to this song, which is already just so beautiful. I mean, I really do love this song. But yeah, I don't know if you heard that he wrote it for his daughter.
I don't maybe in passing, but that that little fact didn't stick. But it makes me think, and I know we're gonna mention them later, but I do want to mention it now because it's very much in lieu and piggybacks on what you just said. But isn't that the same thing about the song "Joy" by Blackstreet? Like they wrote it for their
Oh,
children?
yeah.
Yeah, or one of them wrote it for one of their kids or about
Interesting.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost feel like I've heard that. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to bring that up again.
hmm So that was 1990. If you are interested in learning more, please visit rhythmandschooledpodcast.com for our archive of shows, notes, and references for your own independent schooling and get to know us. We fly. Our email is the411@rhythmandschooledpodcast.com. If you have feedback and want to speak out on your favorite R&B artists of the 90s, we'll be sure to read and share on the show eventually. And on Twitter and possibly even Hive, follow the flow at 90s R&B Pod. Again, that is at 90s R&B Pod. We will have all those links available to you as well.
And to hear curated mixtapes for each episode, find them exclusively on Spotify.
Until next time, peace, everybody.
Peace.